Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webcast, our Profisee Data After Dark webcast, latest in the series of these webcasts that we've been doing, featuring different things each time, mostly customers. And in this case, we're featuring Domino's and Cliff Miller of Domino's. We'll introduce him in just a second. I see there's people still joining pretty rapidly, so we'll just talk for a minute here and kind of do some broad introductions as people join the webcast. And I'm seeing, by the way, on the webcast, a number of familiar names from existing customers, even seeing someone from Domino's here, as well as a number of large companies from all different industries. So welcome, everybody. If you're one of the fortunate people or smart people who signed up very early for this, then you may already have received your $25 Domino's gift card. If you did, then please make sure and enjoy your pizza. And for anybody who didn't, then hopefully you'll enjoy the webcast and get something out of it anyway. So we're very excited to have Cliff from Domino's talk to us about a number of different use cases that Domino's is using Profisee for in the world of master data management. We're going to get into all of that and why they're using Profisee for what turns out to be a broad range of different use cases, using the same tool set for things that are widely different, but all are solving problems in the world of master data. So we'll take probably about half an hour or so to kind of to walk through the conversation. We're going to use some PowerPoint slides just to support the conversation, but hopefully we're not going to PowerPoint you to death. This will be more of a way of just structuring the content. You can drop any questions into the Q&A, and we will try and pick and choose from those and answer some of those questions as we go through. If there's any that are still remaining outstanding at the end, we will try and capture them, and any that we don't get within the time available, we'll follow up with you one-on-one. And you can ask anything about, anything that's specific to Domino's and what Cliff's talking about, or you can ask about the product. And again, if we don't answer them here on the call, we will follow up with you separately. So with that, let me have Cliff, Enterprise Data Architect from Domino's, introduce himself, then we will kind of dive into this. Cliff, can you tell us a bit about your job?
Yeah. Afternoon, everybody. My name is Cliff Miller. I'm doing enterprise data architecture work at Domino's Pizza, our World Resource Center in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I've been with the company 16 years this year, and about 10 of it in the data and analytics space. And I've got our experience with Profisee goes back about 6, 7 years at this point. So we've got a lot of track record to fall back on for today's discussion.
I recall when I joined Profisee just a little over 2 years ago, Domino's was the first use case that everyone wanted to tell me about because you were doing such large and broad things. So thanks for being here. Before we get any deeper into this, Domino's is a public company, and this is just to remind Cliff not to get too excited and to only talk about things that are very much limited to this use case. So just bear that in mind, that there are some things that Cliff can't talk about publicly. Anything else to add on this one, Cliff?
No, it's just our Surgeon General's warning. Pretty standard.
There you go. Exactly. Got to be there. All right. So why don't you just start off by telling us a little bit about, we all know who Domino's is as a company, but a little bit about some of the ways that you guys operate and how you think about data and technology, and just a little bit of background for us.
Sure. No problem. I think when I drafted this slide, what I wanted to convey is that we've got a lot of innovation happening at our organization in lots of ways, operationally, in terms of what we do at our stores and our supply chains, how we execute, and ultimately all being, for the end consumer. And a lot of it, has a ton to do with technology. And so we've got things from really cool, accessible ordering devices and platforms all the way to really cutting edge delivery methods and vehicles these days. But for us, it goes beyond just that. Anything that we do, we want to be sure that all of our technology, whether it's physical or whether, it's kind of, ones and zeros, is really working as hard as our team members do. And so data for us is just like anything else. And data and really information, the story it tells, what it can do for you in terms of efficiency and making you smarter about your own business, all are things that are super critical and very important to us as an organization. So we've worked over the last several years to build that into the fabric of our culture and our team, and it's just kind of become who we are. Our prior CEO Patrick was fond of saying that we're a technology company that happens to sell pizza at this point, and that was part of that big shift for us in our digital transformation, and it's something that's never done, right? So we're always on that journey, and we're never really finished, but it's a mantra that we stick with kind of day in and day out.
Was there a single turning point where that kind of pivot happened, or has that just been a slow tide over many years?
Maybe. I would say it's probably been over time, because those types of changes are not. I mean, it's big. It's not an easy change for organizations that are fairly large to make. So I would say it's something that evolved, that we worked hard at in the past. We continue to work hard at, today, and we'll always work hard at in the future, because you can't slow down and kind of rest on your laurels. You've got to go after being nimble and agile and continuing to innovate and not being complacent with where you've gotten to and where you came from.
Interesting. A lot of the customers we speak to come to us and they think about MDM and come to us and talk to us because they're facing some kind of big pivotal hurdle. We all call it digital transformation, but the realization that data as an asset of the business and needs to be managed as an asset of the business is one of those things that it can be a point of crystallization where you say, you know what, we have a lot of data, but we can't use it unless the foundation of some of our most important things like our customer, our product, whatever information is kind of clean and organized.
Yeah, and that's tough. I mean, those are depending on how much data you're talking about, how many domains, how they all weave together. I think some people I've talked to believe that, as I get into conversations with them about our information management practice, like I had no idea like it was this complex or that intricate. And it very much is. And I imagine a lot of that is true in many organizations. And I think people can get to a point where they lose some faith that, change is really possible. It's been bad data for a long time. It'll, I don't know how we're going to make, heads or tails out of it and make something good come out of something bad. And, I think a lot of that stems from leadership and the buy-in that you get around the ability to do something great, but there's hard work up front. And so that it was there for us too. It didn't happen overnight. And like I said, it's always something that we're pushing ourselves on. So it can be challenging.
So let's use this graphic here that's, I know, one of your favorites, to just talk a little bit about where you started and why you started, and then a little bit about how it's grown, and then we can drill down into some of the individual use cases and domains and how you're managing them today.
Sure. So we tried to just kind of set this graphic up to actually talk about data at our own organization, not just outside of it, in different ways. So there's lots of, the boxes in gray there are different data domains that we've got across the whole org. We've got foundational stuff kind of behind it there in green. And then, we take in a lot of other reference and transactional data and weave it all together, to really try and tell the most accurate and compelling story that we can. And so for us, if you look in that upper right-hand section of the blue box, we started at consumer, which in kind of a grand sense of irony was one of the most intricate and one of the hardest ones our hardest nuts to crack, because it's a B2C relationship we're talking about there. So business to consumer, not to another business. So, right out of the gate, we're in the hundreds of millions of source and golden records there, and figuring out matching algorithms, all in a automated kind of hands-off sense, with really no data stewardship in the traditional sense, in the MDM sense of data stewardship. So we don't have people hand-holding this on a daily basis. And we really wanted to get to a point where we had a much better handle on how our consumers were behaving, what their trends and their patterns were, and the ability to identify them and weave all of that together, because we've got lots of digital channels. We also, you can still call a store, you can still walk in and order, and we want to be sure that all of those things are getting stitched together for every customer, or as many as we possibly can. So we really started at consumer, and for several years made that our focus around MDM in our group, Enterprise Information Management, or EIM, as we affectionately abbreviated to. And so that's what we did for several years. We got really, really good at mastering consumer, and then building segments and all kinds of marketing opportunity off of that information. And then we started looking around at each other and saying, we've got these other things that we need to go do, and we already own this platform, and it's not domain specific. So, could we just leverage it to, branch out into other areas? And so we've got some other slides or another slide here in a second that'll talk about, IT assets. People, when we talked about doing that, people kind of looked at us and scratched their heads, and it's great. I mean, it's a spot where we can coordinate all of our IT gear and IP and kind of in one place and keep track of it. Supply chain, another great example. That was one that they had a problem that was really data related, and so we said, could we apply this platform to it? And we extended that to locations that were moving over into this, into the Profisee platform as well. And then metadata glossary is something that we are starting to really, it's already built out, but to really put a lot of time and effort into to give us that kind of data glossary with some governance, but not too much governance type of thing, and have it be fit for the organization. So yeah, a lot of use cases that stemmed off of that initial one, simply because we knew and figured out that those uses were very much in the wheelhouse of the rest of the platform.
So we'll jump into some of those in detail in just a moment, but kind of broadly before we do that, how does the company Domino's and your IT organization think about master data at this point, having been educated a little bit by you and your team? Do they view it as kind of the core fabric of how enterprise data is managed, or do they view it as just individual silo use cases one at a time? I mean, what's the general thinking in the organization about it?
So I would say we years ago probably would have thought about it in more of a siloed approach, but day over day over day, we continue to see that all of the information, or almost everything, really weaves together and is important to think about together because of the additional things that you can go do with it. So it's how do I want to phrase this? It's not something that just happened overnight, and it takes, like I said, it takes work. But if you can step back and look at it a little bit broader and say, okay, well, how would these pieces of the puzzle go together if we thought about it this way? Really interesting things, tend to come out of something like that.
Excellent. All right. So just as we jump to the next step and kind of go through some of these, I would observe, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this, your original use case about customers, and obviously Domino's has millions of customers, tens of millions, I'm not sure how many millions of customers,
Hundreds.
and you're doing a very large matching exercise in near real time in order to improve the customer ordering experience. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And which obviously necessarily has got very little, as you said, hand-holding or active data stewardship. You're just using whatever data you have in order to draw some conclusions. And then on the other end of the scale, you now have some use cases which are much lower volume, much more deliberate curation by data stewards, which means makes for a very different interaction with the tool set. Can you just kind of characterize those that spectrum of different use cases before we get into them one by one?
Yeah, so right. So like I said, the consumer is very hands-off. It's basically 100% automated. All of the matching rules we've distilled down to algorithms that let us, with as much confidence as we can, and dialing up and down switches and knobs around confidence scores, let us bucket people and match them and link them and stitch them together and create golden records. All of that happens on a 24-hour cycle, right? So we're constantly bringing in new data and matching it to existing data. That is very different in the world of MDM, as I've come to know it, from more traditional MDM use cases. So we've also got some. There's a fair amount of automation in the IT asset stuff, but like our store locations, that actually has a fair amount of data stewardship, because it's things that people are adding and updating to our store master, if you will, that only come in through that human interaction, whether it's between our legal team and our franchise development team, or our franchise development team or store operations team. All of those people working together actually, make that process go. And so, our use of the platform, while it was initially, we never got into the UI and never really were looking up records like that. Now, those additional uses have brought that to the forefront. And so we can support both without really having to deploy anything different, because the platform allows us to handle both types of data processing, right? One's a little bit more hands-on and one is very much hands-off.
Very good. All right, let's jump into some of these in detail. And these are kind of 5 broad, I'll characterize them as domains or use cases. We'll go through them one by one and let you kind of describe what's going on in each. And let's start with the customer, which is the original and probably still biggest use case. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing at a detailed level there.
So if to get down in the weeds, what our group is doing is we are gathering and collating all of our point of sale data domestically, and I'm kind of trying to peek at some of the questions in the Q&A box. I'll try and color them in a little bit too. So it started off with our domestic business, POS transactions, digital commerce, bringing all that together. We distill that down to kind of like unique instances of people that we see doing business with us. We then send that down to the MDM platform, and we're doing all of our matching and linking there with multiple strategies on multiple nodes, and we bring that back together into a unique individual, and then we take all of that back into our enterprise data warehouse, and then we start building stuff up on top of it. We create segments and behavioral, longitudinal type metrics on all of those, on the orders of all of those individuals. And so what you can start doing is building up a really rich picture of how somebody likes to engage with our brand, when, the channels, what they like, all of those things, because we have such a rich data set around our store operations, are possible in the consumer space now for us. So all of that ultimately yields more personalization, or more effective personalization on our digital platforms, because we surface that information back to our e-com teams and whatnot to dip into, as well as our marketing team to start segmenting and marketing to, because we really want that interaction, whether we're talking to you, communicating with you, not just in the ordering process, but anything that we're doing with a consumer, to be as relevant and meaningful as possible. Because we all get a million emails these days and texts and tweets and all kinds of different things. And the more that we can have that be, on point for each person, I think the better off that relationship ultimately is. And they don't see an impetus or a barrier to doing business with us because we make it frictionless, or as frictionless as we possibly can for them. So I mean that's really consumer started out in that regard, still is to this day, and we continue to extend that in ways that keeps our consumer, which for us is near and dearest to our heart, at the forefront of of anything that we chart out. So if somebody has an idea or we're brainstorming something and we believe that there's a use there, we draw it back to how is this benefiting the end consumer? How are we making their experience better? And we don't do things for kind of the sake of building up some data that really kind of does nothing or it doesn't go anywhere. So, but all of that is really consumer centric still.
So you're building a composite picture of your customer so that you can interact with them better. Is there an artificial intelligence element to this person probably would be interested in this, or is it more programmatic, or where are you at in that?
Yeah, so our adoption of ML and AI type work has really exploded over the last several years as a testament to our data science team. That group is a very smart set of folks who are building up a lot of these, what segments should we go after? What are some of our smartest marketing approaches? Because we're always thinking about, our media mix spend and, what the best ROI is for reaching our consumers. And they help drive that. And they're standing on top of this type of information and using it in their prescriptive and predictive models. And so where this, it's kind of started out to be a customer 360, and then we're doing segmentation on top of that, and then we're using it for marketing and things of that nature. Now we've injected ML into that equation, so that we're really using that as, in addition to all those other things, to continue to make that consumer's experience better, because we always draw back to that. So we don't just go create a model for the sake of creating a model and trying something out. We'll try something out, but it's still grounded in our commitment to our customers and that experience with our brand.
Fantastic. All right, so then let's move from that to the next one, which I think is store locations. What's the thought process behind that one?
Yeah, so we've had a store master for a very long time. I mean, since I started over 16 years ago, and I think even before that. And it has kind of been in the same technology it's been in for those 15 years-ish. And we got to a point where we said, well, it probably makes sense for us, EIM, to look at taking that over, because we've got a platform that we own that can do this work and federate that or distribute that information out to all the places it needs to go. And at times it put a lot of onus on a team right now that got kind of put into the mode and the role of doing MDM work, but it wasn't necessarily their bailiwick. And we're at this point kind of just working on centralizing and registering all of that information for all of our stores, because we have a lot of information that we know about and manage internally, but we also gather for stores across the world. It can be challenging to gather something that you might just think is as simple as a latitude and a longitude. But without boots on the ground in every country in the world, that can be challenging. So we've got some programs out there where we're working with third parties, and so we're taking some of that information in and co-locating it or centralizing it in our new store master inside of Profisee, which has proved to be very well adopted at this point. And we're just waiting to blow that out to the rest of the domestic business. We actually started with international because there was more of kind of an urgent need over there to do some things that they wanted to go do with that side of the business. But we'll look to house it all in this platform, and then basically we're in a hub and spoke model, distribute that out to whoever we need to get it to.
Super. So again, the different end of the spectrum from millions of customers that you're just trying to piece together to a much more curated data set where data stewards are going in there and properly building it, but they're doing that once properly so that it doesn't have to be done many, many different times in many, many different systems.
Yeah, and so store or location is used almost everywhere across our enterprise in some way, shape, or form. And which I imagine lots of people on this call, if they're in the business of data management or even MDM, can be challenging. To get something done really well and succinctly, and have that trust in your core being spread out to all of the satellite targets that it needs to go to. If you don't have that trust, it can be very challenging, and it can be difficult to pick apart where something might be happening. If this platform's got this copy and this platform's got this copy, your points of failure or difference can multiply exponentially very quickly. So for us, that was one of the other things that we were looking to do as we centralize that, we'll start to distribute that out in a very consistent manner. And this one, for any, if you were to label us in industry parlance, I mean, we're in the retail sector. So any other retailers out there with, physical locations, I think could probably appreciate this one. This is a very kind of traditional MDM type of operation where you're trying to be sure that as much as you can know about your locations, where they are, and all different kinds of things about them.
Interestingly, I find location is one of those things that it's hardly ever the first use case, but it's usually the second or third for manufacturing, for healthcare. I mean, knowing locations for billing, for deliveries, for scheduling, all kinds of different things. It turns out to be, it's just one of those things that's like, oh, we could do this now. And so people often do.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, when we started this one, I think one of the things that we had never done before is that we wanted to do was enable, and I put it on there as a second bullet, was really enable workflow. Because there's a lot of groups in that business process of planning, opening, and launching a store. There's a lot of teams in our organization that get involved, and that's traditionally been tough or tougher. And all of those handshakes for us have to really be perfect for everything to go just right. And so we wanted to integrate some workflow into that, which the platform also had that capability for us. And so we said, well, based on us wanting to centralize it and wanting to inject some workflow steps into that and some approvals and routing and whatnot, it made a lot of sense to put it in that platform.
Perfect. Just keeping an eye on the time. So let's talk a little bit about Marketing Calendar. What's that one all about? So
this really stemmed from a very intricate and intense office business document that a lot of our organization relies on. So as many folks out there, again, who are in retail can probably appreciate, is your marketing teams often have a very detailed plan and a series of things that they want to go execute, either day over day, week over week, or month over month. And we're no different. So we started taking a look at what that was, and we had a need, ironically, back to ML, to put this information in a place that is easily consumable for our data science team. That actually was the original ask. And so we said, well, we think we could do this in this, in the platform that we've already got, and make it available to, in a secure manner to all the folks who should have access, to be able to view it and use it. And so it's turned into a centralized location for our folks to manage that information, but then also that they don't have to worry about it. It just gets distributed and made available to the right folks. We'll have a visualization layer on top of it so that we can ultimately retire that business document. But one of the key aspects of it is now, one of the bread and butter items that our folks in data science are leveraging for machine learning when we're talking about our marketing activities and digital boost weeks and things like that really play a big part in having accurate and reliable prescriptive machine learning results.
Fantastic. And so another opportunity to centralize data and process that then gets leveraged across many different consumers of the data, right?
Yeah, right. And hopefully taking some more of that manual labor out of the hands of our users, making it as easy for them as possible to actually, create that data set, and then not having to worry about how they distribute it or make it available. All that can be done in on a need to know basis in a very secure manner. So, for us, kind of around the table, we looked at each other and said, well, this seems like another win-win-win. So let's go after it.
And I'm guessing supply chain has a little bit of some of the same themes.
It does. Our supply chain crew is incredible. Number one, if they're watching this, my hat's off to them. They are fantastic. And when they came to us with this particular problem, they were really trying to get a handle again on something that we were working on in terms of machine learning when it came to demand forecasting for different commodities and things, coming from our suppliers, ultimately going out to our stores, is making a linkage and a mapping between our point of sale and some of the legacy stuff that we've got going on in our supply chain centers. And so we got to a point where we were able to, this one's a bit more data stewardy, more traditional MDM style work, is provide them a spot where they could make those relationships, maintain that data. And then again, it's all made available in kind of like lights out automation to our data science team. And they bring it into their prescriptive and demand forecasting models, and it becomes a way for us to be as hyper accurate as we can around our commissary, stocking levels for various parts and elements of our inventory, or really our items that go into our products in our stores.
Excellent. And then the final one here, which I think is a little bit different, at least it seems quite different to me, IT asset configuration management. All the others are to do with the operation of the, making and selling pizzas, and this one's a little bit different. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, this one actually was born out of a need that we identified in IT to be able to run our own business. We've got, like many folks, we've got a lot of different things that we're trying to coordinate: physical assets, software assets, and things like that. I forget, it was a couple of years ago. It was a particular bug and ransomware that ended up coming out, and we had to figure out, based on all of our, operating systems and things we have deployed, where we need to apply that patch. And we just said, okay, there's got to be a better way to manage all of this stuff and keep track of it, and then also be able to use it for future, patching and maintenance planning as well. So this one was really kind of just, it was to help out the IT family, as it were, to help us be, more effective in what we're doing. And so, we got together and we knew that we had a platform that could centralize this stuff, and we knew that we had ways to automate that and bring that stuff together. And so, we applied that technology to a IT problem or an IT need, as opposed to kind of a more traditional business need. But all the pieces and parts were there for the taking. And so again, we said, well, we've got to invest our time and our brain power to it, but we could get it done in the platform that we already had.
Excellent. So that's really the end of the stuff that we have supported by slides, but we can take any questions. There's some questions already in the chat box that we'll just whip through in a second here. So anyway, if there's any more questions, please drop them in there now. One of the ones that I wanted to ask is the fact that you're doing all of this in a single platform, Profisee. How important was that to deciding to go ahead and bite off, one more and one more and one more use case? Was that a factor? Was there like a learning curve? Was the product particularly helpful in doing that, or what was the dynamic that led you to that?
Well, we had used it for, like I said, about 6 years in the consumer or customer space. So from a data processing perspective, we knew it really well. I kind of started feeling it out in terms of, and this goes back to the 6.0 release with the web portal and whatnot. In one of our kind of our annual business reviews with you guys, you did a show and tell, and I thought, there's probably some use here that we could gather or gain without having to think about bringing in yet another technology or adding something else. And so we started small down that path, and then when you prove out that you can do it once and you get good at that too, then it becomes easier to see other spots where you can make a difference, improve process, streamline cost, and all of those types of things, and leverage the things that you've already got, asset wise, IT acumen wise, and really continue to move the needle without having to reinvent the wheel. And so I guess my answer to that one is, our group feels very comfortable with how it operates and what it's capable of, and then it's just a matter of when people start coming to us and talking about what they need to do, we've already got a good idea of what this could do. And so sometimes it's a fit and sometimes it's not, and so we apply it where it makes sense, and where it doesn't, we just say, okay, well that's not going to fit there, and that's all right. It's not the end of the world. But it gives us a great set of tools in our toolbox to go after some of those things and do it pretty seamlessly.
Would it be stretched to say that your team has become a center of expertise, so that when certain types of problems come up, the immediate knee-jerk is, let's go see if we can do it with MDM first?
Yeah, in fact, I had a call today about something that's along the lines of customer, but just in a little bit different space in terms of people. We've really become a group that people start to turn to, I think, first to figure out, hey, we know these guys are good at bringing in data. We know that they're good at managing it, and we've got a need. So let's go talk to them and see what they think. And I love that aspect of our organization and of our team, because it really lets us help innovate in a way with information that I think sets us apart, or I think sets really high-performing organizations apart, is when they're leveraging data to its absolute potential.
Excellent. All right, let's get through, look at some of these questions. So where do you store menu data for Domino's.com? Do you use Profisee for that, or is that a whole different thing?
So that one is a little bit trickier to explain. It is currently not in Profisee, probably for some more legacy reasons than not. When it comes to our stores, in our menu integration with our point of sale and our digital platform is very, very intricate. And it's not that it couldn't be done, but based on what we do with both of those platforms that we have developed, 100% internally, is we've gotten very comfortable with the way that we've integrated the menu to date. And so I think that's one that if we thought about that, it would really have to be, there'd have to be a great reason to switch out of what we're already doing, because of the need and the speed around, load times of pages and things like that. I'm sure it could be done, but it's not one of the ones that we go bite off, or would look to bite off right away, just because of its impact and scope around all of
And
our
it's not a current
operations.
problem. It sounds like it's a solved problem already.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't think there's, it's not like a nagging, knee injury or something like that we can't sprint as fast as we want to go. I think it's the opposite. We run really fast in that space, and so there's just not, that's not a squeaky wheel for us.
Yeah, and just for the person that asked that question, I can't tell which company you're from, but we do have other companies like Red Robin stores menu items. We have another organization, I'm not sure if I can use their name or not, so I won't, that is also using us to manage menu items and ordering, and even Anheuser-Busch uses us to manage ingredient lists. So it is a thing, just not in this case. Another question, Cliff. Does the platform have access to all your data, even read? I'm not quite sure what that means, but maybe you can interpret that.
Well, so I guess I see that question. Let me try and phrase my answer this way. In terms of consumer, what we do is we pass down to the platform what it needs to operate on. So I guess I would say it doesn't have access to everything, in part because it doesn't need it. We're big fans of not moving information around more than it needs to be, because there's always compute and clock cycles related to that. It's time and motion. So we really try to be very surgical around where we process information and what we do with it. So in terms of consumer, it has access to everything that it needs to operate, not necessarily access to everything in our EIM ecosystem, if that makes sense. It can read, once it's down in the MDM space, it can fully read and write to do all of the work that it needs to do, because we're passing down what Profisee and MDM would kind of call source records, and then out of those source records get generated golden records, or for us, unique individuals. So it can fully read and write down inside of there, and then we're pulling that back up into our enterprise data warehouse for use in other data assembly and analytical stuff all over the place. So I hope that kind of answers that question.
I think it probably does. All right. What were the 2 to 3 main challenges and critical points to ensure the success of the MDM, and how did Profisee solution help resolve these?
So in a couple, I'll go back to consumer, because I think that was some of the hairiest ones for us, because it was so intricate. The platform itself helped around rule creation, maintenance, scoring, configurability. All of that became very easy, or a lot less intense, code-wise, because you're not really writing code to go do that. So in that sense, and working with the Profisee guys over a couple of releases, tuning that operation, that because it's got to, for us, we have to complete inside 24 hours. That's our own internal SLA that we hold ourselves to, so that the volumes of information there that we're dealing with are quite large and are really important. Like I said, we don't have people hand-holding that, so we got it down and tune it to a point where we know what we're getting out the other side is as solid as we can make it based on our the inputs that we're given. What was the second part of that question? Because I had another answer.
Just, two to three challenges.
Right. So from a technology perspective, I think the platform made it easier for us to model that information, get up and running, be able to run those pipelines, see stuff coming out the other side, and then retool that if we needed to. Because that's a lot of it. Didn't happen all in one shot. We're on what I would conservatively call our 4th iteration of our unified customer model, and it's evolved over time. So the changes to that over time have also been pretty easy to make, because you don't have to write thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of code to get it done. The other thing that I would mention around challenges is, in that aspect, is being sure that we had everybody aligned on a definition of what we were trying to accomplish. So I think we had to kind of early on come to the realization that we needed to align on what we call the customer. And I know that seems silly, But there are nuances to, to a customer or a particular entity, in your own business. And there's lots of lenses that people use to look at that. And we had to realize that not every, there wasn't only one version, and we had to allow for different styles of a customer. But, landing on kind of the master one we got everybody to kind of gel and agree on the way we wanted to approach that. And having everybody come together so that it was a collaborative decision, I think it was one of the big turning points for us. And it wasn't like an IT mandate, like, here's what a customer is, thou shalt accept it. I don't think those types of conversations tend to go over very well with your business stakeholders. So it was very much a partnership, and we got very close around, the building of that out. And to this day, it's that, we operate in that same mode. So it's never a one-sided conversation. It's very much a we in the room as we're talking about that stuff. And then one last point that I want to add that actually came up earlier, but I didn't mention it, is when you start talking about master data management, and no knock to the industry, to Profisee or anybody out there, it's just not a sexy topic, right? Business folks kind of get glazed over looks in their eyes when you start.
What do you mean? Of course it's a sexy topic.
Hey, well, okay. Well, maybe to you, maybe to me, I don't know. But what we had to do is kind of reframe the conversation and start talking about what the information could do for them and where it could take them, and where we wanted to go, as opposed to talking about who's going to be a data steward and how are we going to master this and where's the golden record going to live. That's not as important to those people as being able to do something like more effectively segment and target and reach our consumers. That's important to our, to folks like our marketing and our store operations team. That gets them bought in, interested. And once you start talking about it in a meaningful way that they really can, sink their teeth into, that's when all the gears start, meshing in the right way, and you start making a lot of headway. At least that was true for us. And I would imagine, I'd be willing to bet that most organizations would benefit from starting there as opposed to kind of a mandate and working from two opposing sides.
Excellent. So paradoxically, even though it's not sexy, there was a lot of passion in the answer, I feel.
It was hard. I mean, we didn't start at a place where everybody was on the same page, and it's a lot of time together and going back and forth. But what we came out with, collectively from that was something that all of us really shared a belief in, and it proved itself out. And so you look at that process and go, man, it's hard to knock it when you see the result on the other end.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's a process for sure. And there's technical challenges, but the change management and adoption challenges tend to be the ones that, take more cycles, just because there's more people involved. It's not just technology.
Yeah, it's often it's a human element, right? And it's about communication and collaboration and getting everybody together on the same page.
All right, a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap up here. What automation integration keeps your marketing calendar details updated and visible to many internal stakeholders?
Well, so in terms of the marketing calendar, there's not as much automation on that front. That one that would fall into the kind of the more traditional user data steward maintained type of data set for us. Now, what we are doing is we're taking that information from the Profisee core, and we're depositing it inside of our enterprise data warehouse, and then we federate it out from there. So we try to follow kind of a standard practice around data distribution. And so all the places that should get it, who need to get it, and those who don't. Because again, to move data around kind of needlessly doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us. So I would say on that front, the automation is in the distribution side of it, but that one incorporates a very real, I've got great people in marketing who we actually just this week turned all of this up and went live on it. And we slow walked it because it is such a critical aspect to a number of our organization, or our number of teams throughout our organization. We didn't want to flip a switch and not have everybody on the same page. So that one's probably less automation.
Okay. There was a question from early on, and you partially answered it earlier, but maybe just to recap. Are you doing all of these things that you described globally, or is it just US, or what's the general strategy for rollout there?
I saw that question from Dale. It's a great question. So we operate in 85 countries around the world and climbing. We started off in the domestic US and around consumer. And also, so I guess, when it comes to global, we're running our IT stuff globally. So I would say the IT asset management is kind of a global play there because it's, we're running stuff across the world. We haven't blown out like the customer solution to our international master franchisee partners yet, not for lack of want. Because we actually in the States believe there's a great deal for them to gain by leveraging our solution. If you didn't know, pizza buying is fairly consistent across the earth. There's nuances here and there, but a lot of it is the same. And a lot of what you're trying to get at is the same. And so we believe there's actually a lot of economies of scale that we can bring to bear for those international master franchisees, and we're starting to head down that path and talk to them about this because they're trying to solve a lot of the same problems that we were 6 years ago, and we've come a long way from where we were, and we want to jumpstart those other folks in that and not have to have them go through the same the same trial and error that we did. So. I guess the answer to that one is it is U.S. centric now, but it does not need to be based on how we designed it and what our business model is across the world or across the globe. And I realize that may be very different for other organizations. An international business may be different from maybe a domestic business, and I think you could probably still look at adapting it. You just got to know where those gaps and what the nuances are between your markets, and then approach it that way. But and that's not to say that our business. Please don't make me think that there isn't differences in Domino's internationally as domestic. But I mean, there's the core elements of it. I think share a lot of commonality, and so that's where we want to try and leverage the solution if we possibly can.
All right, here's an interesting one for you. It just came in. Since you're in 85 countries, do you have NLP for multi-categorization for each of those languages? Do you just use one model? I'm assuming you use some kind of multi-categorization.
And here's the way I'll frame that. What I've found in doing some of this research around kind of the PII data elements by region is that things like address varies drastically across the globe. And so, when in coming up with kind of a proof of concept for our international businesses, I started to try to come up with as flexible a model as we can, but with the understanding that if it needs to be different, we just need it to be different. So I wouldn't take the kind of the Lord of the Rings one model to rule them all approach, because that often is fraught with difficulty. I mean, unless you're absolutely good and all the stars align, we would likely build that out market by market and share as much of that core as absolutely possible, and basically extend to the differences where we would need to cover a market specific need.
Okay. And then just before we wrap up, following on from your previous answer, how long did it take to reach that alignment and collaboration and start seeing the value add for the business?
So I would say that, from our Rev 1, version 1 to version 2. That was probably a year's worth of back and forth. And it was so drastic, and I would say a year only because it was so drastically kind of different, the approach that we started to take. Still same data set, still consumer, still a lot of the same elements, but we really had, we stepped back and tried to rethink how we were going to approach it. And, it was not our only initiative. It's certainly, it's one of hundreds that, that were taken on by our collective teams. And so we had to weave that in with other stuff. And we didn't want to make a mistake or do something that, version 2 was no better than version 1. And so I think for that reason, we were very calculated and methodical about how we approached it. But I mean, iteratively after that, one of the great things about, I think, that collaboration is you start to see value much faster. So as we got kind of version 2 in, our data science team started using it, and in a much shorter amount of time said, hey, listen, we love this. And oh, by the way, we'd really like to, tweak it like this. And so we get back together, we talk about it, and then we came up with version 3. And that cyclical version, or that cyclical process of, evaluate, test, deploy, measure, over and over again, those cycles, our goal is to have them be as short as possible so that we do see as much value, and we can shorten that time to market as we possibly can. So, but it's tough. It's tough because, when it comes to data sometimes, and, in the volume that we're talking about, it doesn't always lend itself to kind of an overnight transformation. So if it doesn't happen for you, immediately, don't lose faith, I guess is what I would say. Just stay at it and keep plugging away.
All right. Very, very last question, because we're right at the top of the hour almost. But all of the last couple of 3 questions that you've answered lead me to want to ask, where does MDM go from here for you guys? Assuming you can even answer that, given the legal disclaimer you had at the beginning. So,
I think for us, we will continue to look for places around our organization where information is living and being leveraged, and say, apply some of the same questions to it and say, where could it be more efficient? Where could we standardize? Where can we distribute more effectively and more consistently? And where is that going to add value? And really that last one, I mean, like, where does it add value? How does it make us better? How does it make our consumers' experience better? And if we're answering those questions in ways that lead us back to MDM, then we'll go do it. I mean, it's not really a barrier for us. We won't really talk about it as an MDM thing. We're just going to potentially apply an MDM tactic or, practice to the business case and look to solve it that way. So, I really love to see us use data in that ML space too. That's been extremely exciting to watch and be a part of. So I think more of that, it will lend itself to, spots where we go do some of this work, because, as data scientists go, and I know I'm probably sounding like I'm generalizing, but they'd like us to store everything under the sun, and they'd like every bit of data to be 100% accurate, right? That's how you're going to get the most accurate model prediction coming out the other end. So they really value the information accuracy around, data set and data management. And so I think they're also kind of, firmly in our corner when we want to go talk about pulling something else into our EAM master data umbrella.
Perfect. All right. Perfect timing and perfect last answer. Thank you, Cliff. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being a customer and taking the time to explain some of the different aspects and layers of MDM and how it can be applied. And thank you to all the attendees. We had a pretty big audience on here, and nobody dropped off towards the end. So I can only attribute that to Cliff's compelling conversation.
No, I'm sure it was you, Martin.
I doubt it. Anyway, thank you all for joining. It was an international audience and a lot of people from the East Coast, so it's it's getting late for a lot of people, and we appreciate your time. And if you're one of the people that signed up early and got the Domino's card, we hope you enjoy your pizza. And if you don't, then get a hold of Cliff and let him know.
Yeah, let me know.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for your time. If you have any follow-up questions or anything that we didn't get to in the session here, you can go to the homepage on Profisee and drop a note, or there's probably going to be a follow-up email to this this webcast, and you can reply to that. So thank you very much for your time. We'll call a halt there, and appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Take care, guys. Have a good night, day.